What if everything you've been told about marriage is a lie? What if the very institution that society glorifies as the ultimate proof of love is, in reality, the most sophisticated system of exploitation ever created, designed not to protect men, but to strip them of freedom, identity, and purpose? Think about it. Why do we joke about the old ball and chain? Why do we describe marriage as taking the plunge, like stepping into something dangerous? These aren't harmless phrases. They're unconscious warnings. Warnings that most men ignore until it's too late. This video will expose the hidden truth about marriage, how it exploits men emotionally, psychologically, and economically. And here's my promise. By the end, you'll see patterns you've lived through but never had words to describe. You'll finally understand why so many men feel drained, trapped, and silently resentful inside marriages that were supposed to bring happiness. And more importantly, you'll discover how to reclaim your power, your freedom, and your sense of self before it's too late. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear is rarely spoken aloud. Society needs you asleep to keep the system running. But today, you'll wake up. Now, let's be honest. Most men don't wake up one day and say, "I want to be controlled. I want my money, time, and identity dictated by someone else." No. It happens slowly, invisibly, in the name of love, responsibility, and duty. First, you stop seeing your friends as much. Then your hobbies, selfish. Your free time, absorbed into chores and obligations. Your money, no longer yours. It becomes ours, often with her deciding how it's spent. And the worst part? You think this is normal. You even think it makes you a better man. But here's the truth. You're not becoming a better man. You're being domesticated, conditioned, slowly dismantled until you're psychologically trapped. If this resonates with you, pause for a second. Hit subscribe, leave your thoughts below, and share your voice. Not for me, for you. Because if this feels uncomfortably close to your life, you're not alone. And together, we can bring these truths into the light. Let us pause for a moment and talk about something no man likes to admit out loud, the quiet frustration that builds behind closed doors. You tell yourself you're doing the right thing, providing, protecting, sacrificing, yet deep inside you feel something slipping away. Maybe it's your identity. Maybe it's your freedom. Maybe it's the spark that once made you feel alive. And here's the most dangerous part. Society tells you to ignore that voice. If you complain, you're called selfish. If you express dissatisfaction, you're accused of being ungrateful. If you even question the fairness of marriage, you're labeled immature or commitment phobic. The system is designed to silence men, to keep them obedient, compliant, and, most of all, useful. I understand that pain. I understand the guilt you feel for even having these thoughts, because you've been conditioned to believe that your worth is measured by what you give up. You're told that a real man sacrifices his dreams for his family, that his happiness comes second, that his role is to endure. But here's the truth no one dares to say. Sacrifice does not equal love. It equals control. Think about the way the dynamic begins. In the courtship phase, she's agreeable, affectionate, full of desire. But after commitment, things shift. What once was given freely now becomes conditional. Affection becomes a reward, not an expression. Your choices become negotiations. Your peace of mind depends on someone else's mood. Slowly, without noticing, you stop being you. You become a function, a provider, a fixer, a problem solver, rather than an individual with his own dreams. And this isn't an accident. It's evolutionary programming. Women secure commitment, then optimize it to their benefit. Meanwhile, men remain blind, thinking love alone will protect them. But love isn't the shield you think it is. It's the very weapon used to bind you. Here's where I want you to lean in, because in the next section, I'll reveal the psychological trap that keeps men compliant, even when they know deep down they're being exploited. Once you see this clearly, you'll never look at marriage the same way again. Here's the brutal reality. Marriage doesn't just exploit men financially, it conditions them psychologically. And the conditioning is so subtle that most men actually defend the very system that breaks them. How does that happen? Through what I call domestic programming. It starts with small compromises. You skip a night out with friends to avoid conflict. You choose her favorite restaurant, even though you had another in mind. You defer to her decisions on family plans because it's easier. Each choice feels insignificant, but together they form a chain that binds you tighter and tighter until you stop noticing it's there. This is the psychology of learned helplessness, when a person endures repeated, uncontrollable stress until they stop even trying to change the situation. Soon, you begin to tell yourself that resistance is selfish, that pushing back makes you a bad husband or father. You internalize the phrase, happy wife, happy life, not as advice, but as law. And with that law comes your slow transformation into someone reactive instead of proactive. Your life becomes about maintaining peace, not pursuing purpose. But here's where it gets darker. Society reinforces this trap at every level. Movies glorify the family man who gives up everything for his wife and children. Religion frames total sacrifice as divine duty. Even your friends, already trapped themselves, encourage you to keep playing the role because if you break the illusion, they're forced to face their own imprisonment. It's not just economic servitude, it's psychological warfare. You begin to suffer what I call domestic Stockholm syndrome. You start defending the system that exploits you. You believe that your sacrifices equal love, that your silence equals maturity, that your unhappiness is simply the price of being a real man. And that's why so many men die a little younger, smile a little less, and carry a heaviness in their eyes. They're not just tired, they're broken by years of quiet submission. If this truth unsettles you, good. It should. Because only when you see the trap for what it is, can you begin to break free. If this message is hitting home, subscribe right now and share your thoughts in the comments. Don't stay silent. Your voice matters, and your story could free someone else. Let's uncover the hidden engine behind this entire cycle: evolutionary programming. You see, women are not consciously plotting to exploit men. It's deeper than that. It's biological. For millions of years, survival favored women who could secure commitment, resources, and protection. And once those resources were secured, the instinct shifted from attraction to optimization. That is why what you experienced in the early days of dating feels so different from what happens after marriage. In the beginning, she maximizes appeal. She's agreeable, affectionate, sexually available. She mirrors your interests, supports your ambitions, and minimizes demands. Why? Because securing your commitment is her evolutionary priority. But once she has it, the switch happens. Affection and intimacy become conditional. Shared interests fade if they don't serve the family. Demands grow. Agreeability shrinks. The woman who once competed for your approval now expects your compliance. And here's the key. None of this is conscious manipulation. It's instinct. Just like men are instinctively drawn to youth and fertility, women are wired to extract maximum resources and commitment. Evolution shaped this behavior because it worked. Women who optimized relationships for their own survival out-reproduced those who didn't. The tragedy is that men today are completely unprepared for this reality. Society tells them love is unconditional, that marriage is partnership, that sacrifice is noble. But nature doesn't care about fairness. It cares about survival. And survival has programmed women to prioritize their own security over your personal fulfillment. That's why divorce statistics are so revealing. Women initiate nearly 70 to 80% of divorces. And not because they're simply unhappy. They leave when the cost-benefit analysis shifts, when they believe they can secure better terms elsewhere, or when they've already extracted maximum value. It's not about loyalty. It's about leverage. And here's the part most men can stomach. A wife's love is not unconditional. It is conditional upon your utility, your status, your income, your ability to provide emotional and financial security. The moment those conditions are no longer met, the relationship balance tilts, and so does her love. That may sound harsh, but once you understand that love in marriage is transactional, not eternal, you begin to see the game for what it is, and the man who sees clearly can start to play strategically. If marriage were only about personal dynamics between men and women, breaking free might be easier. But here, as the hidden layer, most men don't even realize until it's too late. The entire system, legal, cultural, and economic, is designed to keep you trapped, even if the marriage ends. Think about it. Divorce should mean freedom, right? If two people no longer want to be together, they part ways. But that's not how it works. When a woman files for divorce, and remember she initiates it 70 to 80% of the time, the system ensures that her financial security remains intact, even at your expense. Alimony, child support, and asset division guarantee that your obligations continue long after the relationship is gone. You keep paying for a family structure you no longer access, and society calls that justice. This isn't an accident. It's institutional reinforcement of the same biological programming we discussed earlier. The court system functions like an extension of evolutionary survival instincts, forcing men to keep providing resources even after being discarded. And because culture frames this as responsibility, you're shamed if you resist. If you fight back, you're a deadbeat. If you comply, you're mature. Either way, the system wins. And here's the kicker. Society celebrates your suffering. Movies, shows, and even religious sermons glorify the selfless husband who gives up his dreams for his wife and kids. Men who speak up are silenced with labels like selfish or toxic. Even your peers enforce the lie. Married men won't admit the truth because doing so would expose their own misery. So they smile, nod, and tell you marriage is hard work while secretly drowning in quiet despair. It's psychological warfare disguised as love, reinforced by laws that guarantee extraction. And the longer you remain blind, the deeper the trap becomes. But here's the question you need to ask yourself. If an institution requires your silence, your compliance, and your suffering to survive, who is it really serving? You or the system? In the next section, we'll break down how this trap not only drains men financially, but erodes their very sense of identity, leaving them shadows of who they once were. Here, as the most devastating cost of marriage that no statistic can fully capture, the erosion of a man's identity. Piece by piece, year after year, he stops being the man he once was. Not because he wanted to change, but because the system demanded it. At first, the changes seem harmless. He skips a hobby to spend more time at home. He takes on extra responsibilities because that's what good husbands do. He compromises his preferences to avoid conflict. Each decision feels small, but together they form a slow dismantling of the self. The man who once had passions, ambitions, and individuality becomes a function. Husband, provider, problem solver. Psychologists call this learned helplessness. When a person faces repeated stress they cannot escape, they eventually stop resisting, even when escape becomes possible. Married men learn over time that their thoughts, feelings, and desires matter less than maintaining peace at home, so they stop asserting themselves, they stop asking for what they need, they stop fighting for who they are. And here's the cruel irony. The very qualities that once attracted their wives, the independence, ambition, confidence, fade under the constant weight of compromise. They become the opposite of what once made them desirable, not because they changed naturally, but because they were domesticated. This is why so many married men look like ghosts of themselves. The spark in their eyes dulls, their voices lose strength, their posture bends under invisible weight. They're not simply tired from life, they're carrying the crushing load of constant self-denial. Even worse, society tells them to celebrate this. That giving up their individuality is maturity, that sacrifice is love. that being a shadow of yourself is proof that you're a real man. But deep down, many feel the gnawing emptiness, the quiet voice asking, "When did I stop being me?" This loss of self is the true prison of marriage. It's not just about money or chores, it's about identity. And once you surrender that, the rest follows easily. In the next section, we'll explore how men unconsciously defend this exploitation, even protecting the very system that enslaves them. Here he says where things take an even darker turn. Many men don't just endure the chains of marriage, they defend them. This is what I call domestic Stockholm syndrome. Just like hostages who begin identifying with their captors, married men often adopt beliefs that justify their own exploitation. They tell themselves, sacrifice equals love. They repeat, a good man puts family first, no matter the cost. They convince themselves that silence is strength, that enduring pain without complaint is maturity. But beneath these rationalizations is a simple truth. They've been broken down so thoroughly that they can imagine freedom anymore. Why do they do this? Because resistance feels worse than submission. Arguing creates conflict. Expressing needs risks rejection. Standing up for themselves feels selfish. So they learn to accept less and call it virtue. They even shame other men for questioning marriage, reinforcing the very cycle that enslaves them. Society plays its part too. Movies glorify the man who sacrifices everything for his wife and children. Religion frames selflessness as holy duty. Even workplaces reward the stable family man image. With every layer of reinforcement, the chains grow heavier and harder to see. And here's the tragedy. Men confuse survival with love. They mistake their ability to endure for proof of devotion. But in reality, they've surrendered their sovereignty. They were no longer living for themselves. They were existing as tools for someone else's benefit. If you've ever caught yourself defending sacrifices that make you miserable, ask, am I rationalizing exploitation as love? Because real love doesn't require the death of your identity. Real love expands you. It doesn't erase you. If this truth resonates, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and let's break the silence together. Because the more men speak up, the harder it becomes for society to keep this illusion alive. In the next section, I'll reveal the conditional nature of women's love and why understanding it is the key to reclaiming your power. It is time to face one of the hardest truths men will ever hear. A woman's love inside marriage is not unconditional. It is deeply conditional, tied directly to your utility. And until you understand this, you'll keep mistaking obligation for devotion. Think about it. In the early stages of courtship, affection flows freely. She laughs at your jokes, shares your interests, and gives herself to you with passion. But once commitment is secured, the dynamic shifts. Intimacy becomes a reward for good behavior, not an expression of genuine desire. Affection comes with terms. Approval depends on compliance. And the moment you stop providing, whether financially, emotionally, or socially, the love begins to fade. This isn't cynicism, it's statistics. Women initiate the overwhelming majority of divorces, and not because they suddenly fall out of love. They leave when the cost-benefit analysis changes. If you lose your job, if you fall ill, if your status declines, the calculus shifts. What was once called forever quickly dissolves into legal paperwork. And here's the cruel irony. Men cling to the idea that love is eternal, that loyalty is proof of character. But women operate from a different framework, evolutionary programming designed for survival, not sentiment. Their commitment is conditional because their biology demands it. They seek security, resources, and stability. When those conditions aren't met, instinct tells them to move on. This doesn't make women villains. It makes them human, shaped by millions of years of survival pressures. But for men, it's devastating if they don't see it coming. Because they keep playing by rules that don't exist, believing devotion is enough, believing sacrifice will earn permanent loyalty. Once you understand this truth, the illusion shatters. You realize that marriage isn't built on unconditional love. It's built on leverage. And in any game of leverage, the one with more options always wins. In the next section, we'll expose how this conditional dynamic fuels the divorce industry and why even freedom after marriage is an illusion. Divorce is often seen as the escape hatch for men who feel trapped in marriage. But here, as the brutal truth, divorce doesn't free you. It tightens the chains in a different way. The very system designed to end the marriage ensures that your obligations live on, long after the vows are broken. Statistics make it clear. Women initiate nearly 70–80% of divorces. Why? Because divorce is rarely about unhappiness. It's about leverage. When the terms of the marriage no longer serve her interests, the system offers her a better deal outside of it. Courts, culture, and laws guarantee that she walks away with security, while you're left carrying the financial and emotional weight. Child support, alimony, and asset division aren't punishments. They're institutionalized extraction. You may no longer live in the house, but you're still paying for it. You may no longer see your children daily, but you're funding their lifestyle. You may no longer share a future, but you're financing hers. Divorce doesn't dissolve the contract. It enforces it with sharper teeth. And here's where it gets darker. Society calls this justice. If you resist, you're labeled a deadbeat. If you comply, you're praised as responsible. The message is clear. Your worth isn't tied to who you are, but to what you can provide, even after rejection. For many men, divorce feels like psychological warfare. They're told to move on. Yet every paycheck, every court order, every custody battle is a reminder that freedom is an illusion. It is not just the loss of money, it is the constant reminder that their role as a provider never ends, even when their role as a partner is over. And this is the final betrayal. The system convinces men to fund the very structure that broke them, while celebrating their suffering as maturity. In the next section, we'll dive into the psychological consequences of this cycle, and why so many divorced men end up shadows of who they once were. Divorce isn't just a legal or financial battle, it's a psychological earthquake. Men often walk away not just poorer, but broken in ways that money can't measure. Imagine giving years of your life, your energy, your dreams, only to be told that your effort was never enough. The system doesn't just take your money, it takes your sense of worth. This is why so many divorced men spiral into depression, substance abuse, or quiet despair. They lose more than a marriage, they lose identity. Who are you when the role you've been conditioned to play, husband, provider, protector, no longer exists? Most men don't know. And in that void, the collapse happens. The tragedy is that society doesn't offer sympathy. Instead, men are told to man up and accept their losses. Meanwhile, women receive empathy, support groups, and cultural validation. The divorced man, on the other hand, is often invisible, except for when it's time to cut another check. This collapse is the final stage of a psychological process that began the day he said, "I do." Marriage strips away his individuality piece by piece. Divorce rips away the illusion that the sacrifice was worth it. What remains is emptiness, unless he learns to rebuild himself from the ground up. And that's the key. Collapse doesn't have to mean the end. For men willing to face the truth, it can be the beginning of something entirely new, a life built on freedom, sovereignty, and self-respect. In the next section, we'll break down how men can shift from this collapse into clarity, seeing marriage not as destiny, but as a contract with costs they can choose to reject. One of the most liberating shifts a man can make is to stop viewing marriage as destiny and start viewing it as a contract. Because that's what it really is. A legal agreement with terms, obligations, and consequences. When you strip away the romance and ceremony, you're left with paperwork that binds your future, your finances, and your freedom. But most men never analyze the contract. They're blinded by love, social pressure, or the fantasy of happily ever after. They sign away their independence without asking basic questions. What am I giving? What am I receiving? Is this trade actually beneficial? And here's the hard truth. If you evaluated marriage like any other contract, most men would never sign it. Imagine a business deal where you give up half your assets, most of your income, and nearly all of your freedom, while the other party has the right to terminate at will and still collect benefits. No rational person would agree. Yet under the spell of love, millions do. This doesn't mean love is fake. It means love shouldn't blind you to reality. Because love fades, emotions shift, and people change. But the contract remains binding. The man who sees marriage as optional, not essential, keeps his sovereignty. The one who treats it like destiny signs away his power. In the next section, we'll explore how men can build psychological strength so they never enter contracts that diminish them, and why sovereignty is the ultimate form of attraction. Here's the secret most men never discover. The less you need a relationship, the stronger your relationships become. Why? Because independence is magnetic. Neediness repels, but sovereignty attracts. When you don't rely on marriage or a partner for happiness, you flip the script. You stop chasing, and suddenly, others chase you. You stop begging for validation, and people work to earn your approval. This isn't manipulation. It's human psychology. People value what is scarce and dismiss what is abundant. But achieving this requires brutal inner work. You must kill the part of yourself that seeks validation in someone else's eyes. You must develop a life so compelling that companionship becomes a bonus, not a necessity. You must be so at peace with solitude that connection only happens if it truly adds value. And here's the paradox. When you stop needing women, women become more drawn to you. When you hold firm boundaries, respect grows. When you prioritize your mission, attraction follows. Sovereignty doesn't make you bitter, it makes you magnetic. This is why true power comes not from control over others, but from control over yourself. A sovereign man cannot be manipulated with affection, guilt, or shame. He gives love from abundance, not desperation. He chooses relationships that enhance his life, not ones that drain it. If this truth speaks to you, subscribe right now and share your thoughts below. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And the more men who wake up, the harder it becomes for this system to exploit us. In the next section, we'll dive into how this sovereignty transforms not only relationships, but life itself. What happens when you stop playing by the rules designed to break you? You find freedom. You realize that marriage is not the ultimate prize. It's a choice, and often, not the best one. Imagine living a life where your time is yours, where your money funds your dreams, not obligations imposed by law or guilt, where your identity isn't sacrificed for approval but expressed fully. This is the life of a sovereign man. And here's the irony. When you live this way, your relationships improve. Women respect men who don't need them. They're drawn to strength, independence, and mystery. They're bored by predictability and suffocated by neediness. The man who loves himself first attracts partners who enhance, not exploit, his life. Society will shame you for choosing this path. They'll call you selfish, immature, even broken. But these are the voices of people who surrendered their freedom long ago. Their judgment isn't about you. It's about protecting the illusion they still live under. The truth is simple. Independence isn't loneliness. Sacrifice isn't love. Real love creates energy, freedom, and growth. Anything else is transaction disguised as romance. In the next section, we'll close this journey with the ultimate revelation. That true fulfillment comes not from what others give you, but from who you become on your own. So here is the final revelation. The most dangerous lie men believe is that happiness comes from marriage, that if you just find the right partner, everything will fall into place. But the truth is this. If you need marriage to feel complete, you've already surrendered your power. True fulfillment comes when you no longer need anyone to validate your existence, when you can stand alone, sovereign, unshaken by the storms of life. Only then can you choose relationships freely, without fear, without desperation. because only then do you understand. Love is not chains. Love is choice. Schopenhauer said, all satisfaction is really and essentially negative only, and never positive. In other words, happiness doesn't come from gaining what you want from others, but from no longer needing anything from them. That is sovereignty. That is freedom. So the question is, will you keep living under illusions designed to exploit you, or will you step into the uncomfortable truth that sets you free? The choice is yours. One path leads to quiet slavery disguised as love. The other leads to sovereignty, strength, and the kind of relationships that only free men can build. If this video resonated, subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and join the conversation. Not for me, for you. Because if this spoke to you, it means you're ready for more. And when you're ready for more, freedom begins.